I still had my graduation tassel in my car when my sister walked into my grandpa's living room like she owned the oxygen. She slid a deed across the table, smiling as she told me to start packing. My parents stood behind her, silent and smug, so I just nodded and said, okay. They were 3 weeks late. The single move I made after graduation had already turned their stolen paperwork into a legal liability. My name is Morgan Flores. I am 28 years old, and if you looked at me on that Tuesday afternoon, you would have seen someone who looked exactly like a stark, hollowed-out version of a college graduate. I was standing in the center of my grandfather's living room in Kingswell Cove, Maine. The air in the house smelled like old paper, sea salt, and the lavender detergent Grandpa Elliot had used for 40 years. It was a smell that usually slowed my heart rate down, but today my pulse was hammering against my ribs. I had driven 6 hours to get here immediately after my final thesis defense. My cap and gown were still tossed in the back seat of my sedan, gathering wrinkles in the humidity. I had not slept more than 4 hours a night for the last month. I was running on caffeine and the strange, numb adrenaline of grief that had not yet found a place to land. Grandpa Elliot had been gone for 3 weeks. The house felt too big without him. It felt quiet. Then the silence broke. It was the sound of tires crunching over the gravel driveway. It was not a hesitant arrival. It was fast, aggressive, the sound of a car expecting the gate to be open. I walked to the window and pulled back the sheer curtain. My stomach turned over, a slow, cold rotation. It was my parents' SUV, and driving it was my younger sister, Lena. They were not supposed to be here. We had agreed that I would come up alone to sort through his personal effects, to organize the clothes for donation, to sit with the memories before we talked about the estate. That was the plan. That was the verbal agreement we had made standing in the funeral home parking lot. I watched Lena step out of the driver's seat. She looked radiant. She was wearing a white sundress that looked brand new, and her hair was blown out in perfect, golden waves. She looked like she was arriving for a summer vacation, not a grim task of sorting through a dead man's belongings. My mother, Teresa, climbed out of the passenger side, smoothing down her skirt. My father, Gavin, emerged from the back, looking around the property with a critical, appraising eye. He was not looking at the ocean view. He was looking at the roof shingles. I went to the front door. I did not open it immediately. I took a breath, held it for 5 seconds, and let it out. I told myself to be kind. I told myself they were grieving too and that everyone handles death differently. Perhaps they just wanted to be together. Perhaps they wanted to help me. I opened the door. Lena was already on the porch step. She did not hug me. She breezed past me into the foyer, bringing a gust of expensive floral perfume that instantly warred with the scent of Grandpa's lavender. "Morgan, you made it," she said. Her voice was bright, too loud for the hallway. "Hi, Lena," I said. I looked at my parents. "Hi, Mom, Dad. I didn't expect you guys until next weekend." Teresa stepped in and offered me a quick, stiff hug. It felt like hugging a mannequin. "We just thought it would be better to get a head start," she said. She pulled away and avoided my eyes, looking instead at the dust on the hallway mirror. Better for who? I wondered, but I did not say it. We walked into the living room. The afternoon light was cutting across the hardwood floors. Lena went straight to the head of the dining table, the spot where Grandpa used to sit to read his morning paper. She placed her leather handbag on the table with a heavy thud. "Sit down." "Morgan," Lena said. It was not a request. It was an instruction. I remained standing. "I am fine standing," I said. "What is going on?" Gavin cleared his throat. He stood behind Lena, his hands clasped behind his back. Teresa moved to the window, blocking the view of the cove, effectively closing the circle around me. "We need to talk about the house," Gavin said. I looked at him. "I thought we agreed to wait. The probate process hasn't even officially started. I have the meeting with the executor next week." Lena laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Oh, Morgan, that is the thing. We do not need to wait for probate." She reached into her bag and pulled out a blue folder. She opened it and slid a document across the polished wood of the table. It stopped inches from my hand. I looked down. It was a deed transfer, a quitclaim deed. Specifically, the paper was thick and crisp. It looked very official. "It is already done," Lena said. Her voice was sweet, casual, the way one might talk about a weather forecast. Mom and Dad and I talked. We made a decision based on what is best for the family. Practical reasons, really. I looked at the paper. I saw my grandfather's signature at the bottom. It looked shaky, wobbly. "What is this?" I asked. My voice sounded calm, which surprised me. "It is the transfer," Lena said. "Grandpa signed it over to me before he passed. He wanted to make sure the house stayed in the family, but he knew you would be busy with your career starting. He didn't want to burden you." I looked at the date next to the signature. It was dated 4 months ago. I was here 4 months ago. I said, "I was here every weekend." "He never mentioned this." Gavin stepped forward. "He didn't want to upset you. Morgan, you know how he was. He wanted to protect you." "Protect me from $1 million asset?" I asked. Teresa turned from the window. "Morgan, please, don't be difficult. Lena is looking to settle down. She has a fiancé now. They need a place to start their lives. You are single, you are young, you can go anywhere. You will bounce back, you always do. Bounce back." The phrase hung in the air. It was the same phrase they used when they gave Lena my car when I went to college because she needed it more. It was the same phrase they used when they missed my graduation because Lena had a minor crisis with a boyfriend. I was the rubber ball. I was the one designed to hit the pavement and return to the hand that threw me. I looked at Lena. She was smiling. It was a small, tight smile. It was the smile of someone who has already won and is just waiting for the loser to realize it. "So the house is yours," I said. "Technically, yes," Lena said. She tapped the paper with a manicured fingernail. "And practically speaking, it does not make sense for you to stay here right now. It is just going to be confusing for the neighbors. We want to start renovations immediately." I looked at the three of them. They were a wall, a unified front. There was no crack in their resolve. They had practiced this. I could see it in the way they stood, in the way they did not interrupt each other. They had rehearsed this conversation in the car on the way up. They had assigned lines. Gavin was the voice of reason. Teresa was the emotional guilt. Lena was the closer. "When do you want me to leave?" I asked. Lena checked her watch. "Well, tonight would be best." She said it so simply. Tonight would be best. Like she was suggesting we order Thai food instead of pizza. Like she was not evicting her sister from the only place that felt like home. "Tonight," I repeated. Gavin nodded. "It is just a clean break. Morgan, rip the bandage off. You can stay at a motel in town tonight and drive back to the city tomorrow. We will reimburse you for the room, of course. Generous." I thought. I looked around the room. I looked at the fireplace where Grandpa and I used to roast marshmallows. I looked at the bookshelf filled with the paperbacks I had read to him when his eyes started to fail. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear that paper in half. I wanted to ask them how they slept at night. But then I looked at Lena's eyes. She was waiting for it. She wanted the fight. She wanted me to yell. If I yelled, I was the unstable one. If I cried, I was the emotional one. If I refused to leave, I was the selfish one. They had a script for every reaction I could possibly have. They were ready to bulldoze me with logic and guilt and gaslighting until I collapsed. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an ambush. And then, clarity washed over me. It was cold and sharp, like the ocean water in the cove. If I fought them now, I would show my hand. If I pointed out that the signature looked forged, they would cover their tracks. If I told them about the conversations Grandpa and I actually had, they would rewrite history. They thought they held all the cards. They thought I was the same Morgan who just wanted everyone to get along. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders drop. I unclenched my jaw. "Okay," I said. The word hung in the quiet room. Lena blinked. She looked confused for a fraction of a second, as if she had braced for impact and hit nothing but air. "Okay," she asked. I nodded. "Okay. If the house is yours, then it is yours. I don't want to be where I'm not wanted. And if Grandpa signed it, then that is that. The tension in the room snapped. It was palpable. Gavin's shoulders slumped in relief. Teresa let out a long breath and finally looked at me with something resembling warmth. "Oh, Morgan," Teresa said, stepping forward. "Thank you. Thank you for being reasonable. We knew you would understand." Lena's smile widened, becoming genuine and predatory all at once. She sat back in the chair, claiming the space. "I am glad you are being mature about this. Morgan, it makes everything so much easier. I will go pack my bag." I said, "I can be out in an hour." "That is perfect," Lena said. She pulled her phone out. "I will let the movers know. They are scheduled to be here in 2 days to clear out the old furniture. We want to gut the living room first." 2 days. They had booked movers before they even spoke to me. They had spent money based on the assumption of my surrender. I turned and walked out of the living room. I walked up the stairs, my hands sliding along the smooth wood of the banister. I could hear them talking below me. Their voices were louder now, excited. They were already discussing paint colors. They were discussing knocking down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room. They were butchering the house before the body was even cold. I entered the guest room where I had been sleeping. I did not pack immediately. I stood in the center of the room and listened to the house. Perfect. I thought, now I knew. I knew exactly who they were. I knew exactly how far they were willing to go. They were willing to forge, to lie, to displace their own daughter and sister for a piece of real estate. They had shown me their absolute worst, assuming I would absorb it like I always did. They had made a fatal error. They assumed I was just Morgan the student, Morgan the daughter, Morgan the doormat. They did not know I was also the trustee. I walked over to my bag. I did not pack my clothes. Instead, I reached into the hidden laptop sleeve at the back of my carry-on. I pulled out my laptop. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. I navigated through my files. I bypassed the thesis drafts. I bypassed the job applications. I went to a folder I had created the morning after my graduation ceremony, exactly 3 days after Grandpa's funeral. The folder was labeled simply, Kingswell Trust. I double-clicked it. The document opened. It was a scanned copy of the irrevocable trust agreement, signed, notarized, and filed with the county clerk 3 weeks ago. The date stamp was clear. The terms were absolute. The house did not belong to Grandpa Elliott when he died. It had not belonged to him for the last month of his life. He had moved it. We had moved it. I looked at the screen. I looked at the clause that named me, Morgan Flores, as the sole trustee and beneficiary. I looked at the clause that specifically voided any prior or subsequent wills or deeds regarding the property unless signed by the trustee. I could hear Lena laughing downstairs. It was a sound of victory. She thought she had just evicted me. I closed the laptop. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was not happiness. It was the cold, hard satisfaction of a steel trap waiting to be sprung. I stood up and began to fold my shirts. I would leave tonight. I would let them have their paint swatches and their movers. I would let them play house for a few days. I would let them spend their money. I would let them dig the hole so deep that they would never be able to climb out of it. I packed my toothbrush. I zipped my bag. Okay. I whispered to the empty room. Let's see how much you really want this house. I drove to the motel in silence. The hum of the tires against the asphalt was the only sound in the world. I did not turn on the radio. I did not call my best friend. I just drove, staring at the white lines flashing by like seconds ticking off a clock. To understand why I walked out of that house without screaming, you have to understand the architecture of the Flores family. It was not built on malice. I truly believe that. My parents did not wake up in the morning plotting ways to destroy my self-esteem. It was more subtle than that. It was a matter of gravity. My sister, Lena, was the sun. From the moment she was born, 2 years after me, she burned bright and hot. She was louder, needier, more charismatic, more chaotic. She walked into a room and the atmosphere shifted. My parents, Gavin and Teresa, simply orbited her. It was a physics problem they never bothered to solve. They just surrendered to the pull. And me. I was the moon. I was the cool, distant satellite that stayed in its lane, reflected the light, and controlled the tides without anyone ever really looking at the surface. I became the easy daughter by necessity. When Lena threw a tantrum in the cereal aisle because she wanted the sugary brand, my mother would look at me quiet, standing by the cart with my hands folded and sigh with relief. "Thank God for you, Morgan," she would say. "You are so low maintenance." I learned early on that being low maintenance was the only way to get praise. If I had a problem, I was adding to the load. If I solved my own problem, I was a good girl. By the time I was 12, "You are so mature for your age," had become my primary identity. But it wasn't a compliment. It was a leash. It was a way of telling me that I was not allowed to be messy. I was not allowed to fail. I was not allowed to need them. I remember my high school graduation. I was valedictorian. I had worked for 4 years to get that title. Studying late into the night while Lena snuck out to parties. During the ceremony, my parents sat in the front row. I saw them. But halfway through my speech, Lena, who was a sophomore then, texted my mother that she felt sick and needed to be picked up from a friend's house. I watched my father check his phone. I saw him lean over to my mother. I saw them get up and leave. They missed the end of the speech. They missed me walking across the stage. Later, at dinner, which was just takeout pizza because Mom was too tired from dealing with Lena's migraine, they told me, "We knew you would be fine. Morgan, you are so strong. You don't need us holding your hand. Lena, though she needs support." That was the narrative. Lena needed, Morgan handled. It wasn't abuse. They fed me, clothed me, paid for my textbooks. They loved me, but love is an active verb, and they spent all their action verbs on my sister. The only person who didn't follow this script was Grandpa Elliot. Grandpa was my father's father, but he looked at Gavin with a mixture of confusion and disappointment that he never bothered to hide. Grandpa lived in Kingswell Cove, in that rambling, cedar-shingled house overlooking the Atlantic. To everyone else, he was a grumpy, taciturn old man who hoarded newspapers and refused to get a smartphone. To me, he was the only person who listened. I started spending my summers there when I was 10. At first, it was just to get out of the way so my parents could focus on Lena's gymnastics camp, or Lena's summer school, or Lena's latest crisis. But soon, it became my sanctuary. The house had a rhythm that soothed my anxious brain. The floorboards in the hallway groaned in F-sharp. The screen door slammed with a specific double thud. The air always tasted of salt and pine needles. Grandpa treated me like an adult, but not in the dismissive way my parents did. He treated me like an equal. We would sit on the back porch for hours, listening to his shortwave radio, tuning into static-filled voices from ships out at sea. "Listen to that, Morgan," he would say, his voice gravelly and low. "That man is 1,000 miles away, but he is telling us exactly where he is. Most people are standing right next to you and can't tell you a damn thing about where they are." He asked me what I thought about the news. He asked me about my books. He didn't interrupt me. When I spoke, he would lean forward, his blue eyes sharp and attentive. He made me feel solid. He made me feel like I wasn't just a shadow on the wall. As the years went by, the dynamic shifted. Grandpa got older. His hands started to shake. His knees gave out. The house, once his kingdom, became a challenge. My parents visited. Of course, they came for Thanksgiving. They came for the 4th of July. They came when the weather was nice, and they could take photos of the ocean to post online with captions like, "Family time is the best time." They brought wine. They sat on the deck. They asked Grandpa how he was doing, and when he said fine, they accepted it and went back to talking about Lena's new job or Lena's new apartment. They didn't see the reality. They didn't see the pile of unpaid bills on the counter because his eyesight was failing and he couldn't read the numbers. They didn't see the expired milk in the fridge. They didn't know that he was skipping his heart medication because the child-proof caps were too hard for him to open. I saw it. When I was in college, and then in grad school, I started driving up every other weekend. It wasn't a chore, it was an act of preservation. I bought a plastic pill organizer and filled it for him every 2 weeks. I took over his checkbook. I sat on the phone with the insurance company for 3 hours at a time. Fighting denied claims while I graded papers for my teaching assistant job. I fixed the leaking faucet in the bathroom because my father said he was too busy at work to drive up and call a plumber. I hired the landscaping crew to clear the brush that was becoming a fire hazard. I became the manager of his life. "You're a good girl, Morgan," Grandpa would say, watching me sort through his mail. He wouldn't say it with relief. Like my mother, he would say it with a heavy sadness. "You carry too much water for people who don't know they are thirsty." "I don't mind," I would tell him, and I didn't, because caring for him was the only thing that felt real. My parents knew I was doing this. They relied on it. "How is Grandpa?" My mother would text me. "He is fine," I would reply. "Good. Thanks for checking on him." She would write back. They never asked about the details. They didn't want to know about the incontinence pads, or the confusion or the fear in his eyes when he forgot the word for spoon. They wanted the sanitized version. They wanted the easy version. Then came the end. The last month was a blur of hospice nurses and morphine drips. I moved into the house. I slept on the cot next to his hospital bed in the living room. I held his hand while he labored to breathe. My parents came for the last 2 days. Lena came for an hour, cried beautifully by his bedside, and then had to leave because the energy was too intense for her. When he died, I felt a silence settle over the world that was heavier than anything I had ever known. I had lost my anchor, but then came the will. I knew Grandpa had money. He had worked as a structural engineer for 40 years, lived simply, and invested wisely, but I didn't know how much. A week after the funeral, I met with his old attorney, Mr. Henderson, alone. My parents were giving me space, which meant they were busy helping Lena move into a new condo. Mr. Henderson sat me down and told me, Grandpa had left small cash gifts to my parents, $10,000 each. He left $5,000 to Lena, and the rest the house, the land, the investment accounts, the savings he left to me. He wanted you to have options, Morgan. Mr. Henderson said, handing me the summary. He told me that you are the only one who knows the value of $1, and more importantly, the value of a home. I looked at the numbers. It wasn't a fortune that would put me on a yacht, but it was enough to pay off my student loans, maintain the house for decades, and allow me to write without fear of starving. It was freedom. It was his final way of protecting me. I drove back to the house that day and cried for an hour, not out of gratitude for the money, but because he had seen me. Even in death, he was taking care of the responsible one. I didn't tell my parents the details. I told them we were still sorting through things. I wanted to grieve in peace before the vultures started circling. I naively thought that grief would be the hardest part of this year. I thought missing him would be the maximum capacity of my pain. I was so wrong. The grief was clean. It was pure. What was happening now, this ambush, this eviction, this smile was dirty. As I pulled the car into the motel parking lot, the neon sign buzzing overhead, a memory clawed its way up from the back of my mind. It was something I hadn't thought about in years, but in the light of today's events, it suddenly looked different. It looked like a warning I had ignored. It was 3 years ago. I had just started my first real job. I had saved $5,000. It was my emergency fund. My mother had called me, frantic. Lena was in trouble. She had taken out a predatory payday loan to fund a business idea that involved selling custom jewelry. And the interest was eating her alive. They were threatening legal action. "We just need a bridge loan. Morgan," my mother had pleaded, "Dad and I are illiquid right now until the bonus checks clear. If you pay it off, we will wire you the money back in 2 weeks. I promise. Please." She is terrified. I paid it. I drained my savings account and paid Lena's debt. 2 weeks went by. No wire transfer. A month went by. I called my mother. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice tight. "Things are a little tight right now. The roof needed repairs." Can you wait another month? I waited. 3 months later. We were at a family dinner. Lena was showing off a new designer purse. My father was talking about their upcoming cruise to Cabo. I brought it up. I did it quietly, in the kitchen, while helping my mother with the dishes. Mom, about that $5,000. She stopped scrubbing. She turned to me, and her face went cold. Morgan, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Why do you have to be so transactional? We are family. We paid for your college tuition. We paid for your braces. Now you are counting pennies with us. Lena was in crisis. You helped her. Why do you have to ruin a nice dinner by bringing up money? I stood there, stunned. They had rewritten the story. It wasn't a loan anymore. It was my obligation. I was the ungrateful one for asking to be repaid. I never got that money back. I stopped asking. I absorbed the loss, just like I absorbed everything else. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, the engine ticking as it cooled. I looked at the motel key in my hand. That was $5,000. This was $1 million estate. If they were willing to gaslit me over $5,000, they wouldn't just rewrite history for this house. They would burn the history books. But this time, I wasn't the daughter asking for a favor. I wasn't the transactional child. I took a deep breath and opened my phone. I saw a text from my lawyer. Dana, everything is secure. The trust is ironclad. Let them play. I texted back. They are moving in on Tuesday. I walked into the motel room and locked the door. I was done being the easy daughter. If they wanted a transaction, I would give them the most expensive one of their lives. To understand why I did not scream when my sister slid that forged deed across the table, you have to understand the 3 weeks that preceded it. You have to understand the sound of a phone ringing in an empty house and the specific, suffocating weight of false concern. It started 48 hours after we put Grandpa Elliot in the ground. I was sitting on the floor of the library, surrounded by stacks of his engineering journals. I was trying to decide whether to donate them to the local university or keep them for myself. The grief was still a physical weight in my chest, a heaviness that made it hard to take a full breath. Then my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Teresa, I answered, expecting her to ask how I was holding up. I expected her to ask if I was eating, or if the silence of the house was getting to me. Morgan, she said. Her voice was honey smooth. It was the voice she used when she wanted to return a dress she had already worn to a party. Have you thought about what you're going to do with the house? There was no preamble, no condolences, no question about my graduation, which had happened in a blur amidst the funeral preparations. I blinked at the phone. Mom, I said, it has been 2 days. I am just trying to get through the inventory. I know, she said, and I could hear the dismissive wave of her hand through the receiver. But we have to be practical. That is a big property for one person, especially a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. You do not want to be tied down to a place like Kingswell Cove. It is so isolated. I am not isolated. I said, I like it here. Silence stretched on the line. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the sound of her recalibrating her strategy. We are just worried, she said, her tone shifting to a lower, graver register. We are worried you are making emotional decisions. You know how you get attached to things. We just want to make sure you have the freedom to bounce back. There was that phrase again, bounce back. As if inheriting a home was a tragic accident I needed to recover from. That call was the opening salvo. Over the next week, the assault became a two-front war. My father, Gavin, took the flank. He did not talk about emotions. He talked about logistics. He called me while I was trying to fix the pilot light on the water heater. Morgan, listen to me, he said. I have been running the numbers on a place that age. You are looking at $10,000 a year in property taxes alone. Then there is the insurance, which is skyrocketing for coastal properties. Have you checked the flood zones? I have. Dad, I said, Grandpa taught me how to read the maps. We are in Zone X. We are fine. You think you are fine, he corrected me. But what happens when the roof goes? That is $20,000. What happens when the septic system fails? You are a teacher. Morgan, or you will be. Do you really want to pour your entire salary into a money pit just for the sake of nostalgia? I am not doing it for nostalgia. I said, I am doing it because I live here. You are overwhelmed, he said. He said it with such finality that for a second, I almost believed him. You just do not realize it yet. Let us handle the heavy lifting. We can take the burden off your shoulders. They never said, we want the house. They always said, we want to help you. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. Then came the physical incursions. Lena started dropping by. She lived 2 hours away in the city, but suddenly, she was in Kingswell Cove 3 times a week. She never called first. She would just appear in the driveway, looking breezy and casual, usually with a latte in hand. I was just in the neighborhood, she would say, stepping past me into the foyer. She walked through the house differently than she used to, before. She walked through it like a guest. Now, she walked through it like an inspector. I watched her one Tuesday afternoon. She was standing in the kitchen, tapping her fingernail against the granite countertop Grandpa had installed 5 years ago. This is so dated, she murmured. We would have to rip this whole island out, open it up, make it modern. I asked. She didn't even look at me. She was too busy visualizing a sledgehammer hitting the stone. You know what I mean, the family. If we are going to get any value out of this place, it needs a refresh. She moved to the living room. She stood in front of the bay window, blocking my view of the ocean. Where is the deed? Morgan, she asked. The question was so sudden, I almost dropped the mug of tea I was holding. It is with the lawyer. I lied. Why? I just want to check the lot lines, she said. I was looking at the side yard. I think there is room for a guest cottage, or maybe a pool, but I need to see the official setbacks. It is in probate. Lena, I said, keeping my voice steady, nothing happens until the process is done. She turned to me then. Her eyes were bright, hard, and devoid of any grief. Well, when it is in one name, it will be easier to manage, she said. She did not say, when it is in your name. She said, one name. The implication hung in the air like smoke. I started to feel a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. It was the feeling of being hunted. I realized then that they were not waiting for me to decide. They were waiting for me to yield. The paranoia set in by inches. I stopped sleeping through the night. I started waking up at 3 a.m, listening to the creaks of the house, wondering if they were actually sounds of intrusion. Then came the neighbor. Mrs. Gable lived 3 houses down. She was a woman who spent 90% of her waking hours gardening and the other 10% watching the street. I ran into her at the mailbox on a fog-heavy Thursday morning. Morgan, dear, she said, leaning over her fence. I saw the photographer yesterday. Very professional looking. I froze. What photographer? Mrs. Gable. The man in the suit? She said. He was out there for an hour, taking pictures of the roofline, taking pictures of the foundation. He had one of those fancy drones, too. I thought maybe you were listing the place already. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had not hired a photographer. Did you catch his name? I asked. No, she said. But he was driving a silver sedan. He was talking on his phone the whole time. Seemed very excited. I went back inside and locked the door. My hands were shaking. A photographer meant a listing. A listing meant a seller. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I had access to Grandpa's digital records. But that wasn't where I needed to look. I went to the County Registry of Deeds website. It was a clunky, outdated portal that looked like it had been built in the 90s. But it held the truth of the land. I searched for the property address. There were the standard entries. The original purchase in 1975, the mortgage satisfaction in 2002, but at the very top of the list, in the pending inquiries section, there was a flag. Someone had requested a certified copy of the plot plan and the original deed 4 days ago. The requester was listed as Verify Title Services, LLC. I didn't know who that was, but I knew I hadn't requested it. I did not call my parents. I did not confront Lena. Instead, I did something I had learned from Grandpa. I started a log. I opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date and time of the photographer sighting. I wrote down the details of the registry inquiry. I went back through my phone and transcribed every voicemail from my mother, noting the timestamps and the escalating urgency in her tone. Concern was their weapon. Documentation would be mine. 2 days later, a truck pulled into the driveway. It wasn't family. It was Mr. Higgins, a local contractor who had done work for Grandpa for years. He was a good man, rough around the edges, with hands like sandpaper. He knocked on the door, holding his cap in his hands. "Miss Morgan," he said, "I hate to bother you. I know you are grieving. It is okay." "Mr. Higgins," I said, "what can I do for you?" "Well," he said, shifting his weight uncomfortably, "I was just confused. Your dad called me yesterday." My stomach tightened. What did he want? He wanted a quote for demolition. Mr. Higgins said, "The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Demolition." I repeated. "Yeah," he said, "not the whole house, just the garage and the sunroom. Said they needed to clear the lot for a new build." He offered me cash if I could start next week. I told him I couldn't touch a thing without the owner's permission, and he said, well. He said the paperwork was being finalized, and he was speaking for the owner. I looked at Mr. Higgins. I looked at the house that Grandpa had built with his own sweat, the sunroom where he had read to me, the garage where he had taught me to change a tire. They wanted to bulldoze it. They wanted to erase him. "Thank you for telling me." "Mr. Higgins," I said. My voice sounded far away. "Please do not touch this property. If anyone else calls you, you tell them to talk to me." He nodded, put his cap back on, and walked away. He looked sad. He knew what was happening. Everyone in town probably knew what was happening except me. I went back inside. I felt sick. It wasn't just greed. It was erasure. They didn't just want the money. They wanted to wipe the slate clean. They wanted to turn Grandpa's legacy into a subdivision. I sat at the computer again. I set up a Google alert for my address. I set up an alert for my grandfather's name. I set up an alert for Flores, combined with Kingswell. I spent the next 24 hours in a state of high-functioning panic. I researched title fraud. I researched adverse possession. I researched every legal way a family could steal a house. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on a Monday morning. Exactly 3 weeks after the funeral, I was drinking coffee, staring at the ocean, trying to find some measure of peace. My phone pinged with an email notification. It wasn't a personal email. It was an automated confirmation from a document filing service called Quick Deed Pro. Subject: confirmation of deed transfer request. Processing. I froze. I hadn't used Quick Deed Pro. I opened the email. "Dear customer, this email is to confirm that your request to transfer the property located at 44 Cove Lane has been received. The quitclaim deed you uploaded is currently being reviewed by our notary network. Once verified, it will be electronically filed with the county clerk. Estimated completion time 24 hours. I stared at the screen. The blood roared in my ears. They had uploaded a deed. They had found a notary. They were 24 hours away from stealing the house legally, or at least creating a legal mess that would take me years and thousands of dollars to untangle. They weren't asking anymore. They weren't suggesting. They were taking. I looked at the time. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. I did not call them. I did not scream. I stood up. I put my coffee cup in the sink. I walked to my car. I had 24 hours to beat them. I drove out of the driveway, past the spot where the photographer had stood, past Mrs. Gable's garden. I wasn't Morgan the daughter anymore. I was Morgan the plaintiff, and I knew exactly where I was going. I did not speed on the way to the law office. I drove exactly the speed limit. I used my turn signals. I stopped completely at every stop sign. When your life is spinning out of control, you cling to the rules you can see. The office of Keene and Marlowe was not in a glass skyscraper with a view of the harbor. It was in a squat, red brick building next to a dentist's office in the older part of town. The kind of place that smelled of stale coffee and printer toner. It was a place where people went to solve problems they did not want their neighbors to know about. I had made the appointment 3 days after graduation, acting on an instinct I did not fully understand at the time. Now, sitting in the waiting room with my hands folded in my lap, I understood it perfectly. It was survival. A woman opened the inner door. She was in her 50s, wearing a sharp gray blazer and glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. This was Dana Keene. She did not look like a woman who offered tea and sympathy. She looked like a woman who read fine print for sport. "Ms. Flores," she said, "come in." I followed her into her office. It was lined with books, not for show, but for use. Their spines were cracked and peeling. I sat down and placed the folder on her desk. Inside was everything. The printout of the quick deed email, the timeline of Lena's visits, the log of my mother's voicemails, the death certificate. Dana put on her glasses. She did not speak for 10 minutes. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic snap of pages turning and the hum of the air conditioner. I watched her eyes scan the text. She did not look surprised. She did not look horrified. She looked bored. Finally, she closed the folder and interlaced her fingers. "You think this is unique?" she said. Her voice was flat, professional. "You think because they are your parents, because she is your sister, that this is a tragedy." I stayed silent. "It is not a tragedy," Dana said. "It is a playbook." She stood up and walked to the whiteboard on the wall. She uncapped a marker. "Families do not steal loudly." "Morgan," she said, writing the word confidence in capital letters. "They do not break in with crowbars. They steal confidently. They steal with hugs. They steal with casserole dishes and offers to help with the laundry. They rely on the fact that you are too polite to accuse them of being thieves." She turned to me. "They are using the urgency script," she continued. "They tell you it has to happen tonight. They tell you it is for your own good. They tell you that you are overwhelmed. They create a crisis taxes, repairs, maintenance, so that they can offer themselves as the solution. And if you hesitate, they pivot to the selfish script. They ask why you are being difficult. They ask why you do not care about the family legacy." It was like she had bugged my phone. She was reciting my last 3 weeks verbatim. "They are counting on you to fold," she said. "They are banking on the fact that you would rather lose the house than lose the relationship." I looked at her. "I think I already lost the relationship," I said. Dana nodded. "Good. Then we can proceed with the law." She sat back down. "We have options. We can file a restraining notice on the title, which flags any transfer attempts. We can file a preemptive fraud report with the county, which starts an investigation, or we can monitor the title and sue them after they make a move. I don't want to sue them later." I said, "I want to stop them now. I want to make it impossible." Dana smiled. It was a small, sharp expression. "Then we do not want a defense. We want a fortress. We want an irrevocable trust." She pulled a fresh legal pad toward her. "Right now, the property is in the estate," she explained. "It is vulnerable to probate challenges, forged deeds, and family pressure. If we move the asset into an irrevocable trust, the owner is no longer you. The owner is the trust. You are the trustee. You control it. You live in it. You benefit from it. But legally, it is locked away. To change the deed, they would not just need your signature, they would need to break the trust itself, which requires a judge and a very high burden of proof." "Do it," I said. Dana paused. "There is one more thing." She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope. It had the bank's logo on it. "Your grandfather was a client of mine for 20 years. She said, "He came to see me 6 months ago. He was worried. He told me that his son, your father, had been asking questions about the property value. He told me his granddaughter, your sister, had asked him to co-sign a loan." My stomach dropped. "I didn't know that." "He refused," Dana said, "but he knew his health was failing. He gave me access to his safe deposit box instructions. He told me that if you ever came to me for help, I was to give you this." She slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was handwritten. The handwriting was shaky, the loops of the letters trembling, but legible. "To Morgan. If you are reading this, I am gone, and the sharks are swimming. I am sorry I could not tell you this in person, but I did not want to burden you while I was still here. You are the only one who sees this house as a home. To the others, it is just a check to be cashed. Do not let them bully you. Do not let them make you feel small. You are the guardian now. Protect the place where we sat and watched the ocean. I trust you. You are the only one I trust. Love, Grandpa. I read it twice. The tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden, but I blinked them back. He had known. He had seen the greed in them long before I did. He had prepared this moment for me. I looked up at Dana. Where do I sign? She opened a new file on her computer. We are going to draft the Kingswell Trust. You will be the sole trustee. We will add a specific clause that requires dual-factor identity verification for any transfer of assets. That means even if they forge your signature, even if they find a crooked notary, the county cannot record the deed without a biometric confirmation from you. She typed rapidly. The sound of the keys was aggressive, like gunfire. We worked for 2 hours. We went through every contingency. We structured the trust to protect against creditors, against lawsuits, and specifically against claims of undue influence from family members. When the document was ready, it was 30 pages long. It was dense. It was heavy. I signed my name on the final page. Morgan Flores, trustee. I initialed the bottom of every page. I dated it. Dana called in 2 witnesses from the outer office. They watched me sign. They signed their names. She stamped it with her notary seal. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper was the most satisfying sound I had heard in weeks. It sounded like a gate slamming shut. Dana organized the papers into a folder. I will file the abstract of trust with the county registry within the hour. She said, by the time you get back to the house, the public record will show that the property belongs to the Kingswell Trust. She leaned forward, her expression serious. You need to be prepared for what happens next. Morgan, I am ready. I said, I do not think you are. She said, when they realize you are not movable, they will escalate. They will not just be angry, they will be vicious. They will lose control of the narrative. So they will try to destroy your character. Expect a public story about you. They will tell people you manipulated a dying man. They will tell people you are mentally unstable. They will tell people you stole their inheritance. Let them talk. I said, I have the truth. Dana looked at the quick deed email printout one last time. There is a difference between a family dispute and what is happening here, she said quietly. She tapped the paper. If they have already uploaded a deed with a forged signature to this service, she said, looking me dead in the eye, then we are not dealing with family drama anymore. We are dealing with a felony. I stood up, taking the folder. The weight of it felt good in my hand. Then I guess I should let them know I am moving out. I said. Donna nodded. Let them think they won. Let them walk into the trap. I walked out of the office and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the afternoon. The air smelled of exhaust and asphalt, but under it, I could smell the ocean waiting for me. I checked my watch. It was 2 o'clock. I had signed my name. I had locked the gate. And now, I was going to go home and tell my family exactly what they wanted to hear, just so I could watch them hang themselves with their own rope. The following weekend, the dynamic shifted so abruptly it gave me emotional whiplash. The aggression of the eviction notice vanished, replaced by a suffocating, performative warmth that was infinitely more terrifying. They stopped demanding I leave. Instead, they decided to love me into submission. It began with a text from my mother. Teresa, on Thursday, we are coming up for Sunday dinner. I am bringing your favorite roast. Let's just be a family again. I knew exactly what this was. In the business world, it is called a merger negotiation. In the Flores family, it was the soft phase of a hostile takeover. They had realized that bullying me might cause me to lawyer up. Little did they know I already had, so now they were pivoting to manipulation. They arrived at noon on Sunday. The weather was gray and blustery, the ocean churning in a way that usually kept tourists away. But my family marched up the walkway with smiles plastered on their faces. Lena carried a bottle of expensive wine. Gavin carried a box of pastries from a bakery in the city that I used to love when I was 12. We entered the house, and the performance began. Lena was the lead actress. She did not sit down. She floated. She moved through the rooms with a proprietary air, touching the door frames and the window sills. But this time, her commentary had changed. It wasn't, "Get out." It was, "We." "We should really think about opening up this hallway," she said, running her hand along the original wainscoting. "If we knock out this partition, the light would flow all the way to the kitchen. What do you think, Morgan? Wouldn't that be better for us?" She emphasized the word, us. I stood by the kitchen island, chopping vegetables for the salad. I kept my face neutral. "That is a load-bearing wall." "Lena," I said. "Grandpa always said the house would fold in on itself without it." Lena laughed, a light, tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Grandpa was so old-fashioned with his engineering. Modern beams can support anything. We just need to update the records and get a structural engineer out here. I actually have a friend who could do it for us next week." There it was again. Us. We. She was mentally actively occupying the space, dragging me into a collective ownership that did not exist. We sat down to dinner at 3 o'clock. The roast chicken was perfect. The wine was poured. The conversation was carefully curated to avoid the landmines of the past 3 weeks. They asked about my thesis defense. They asked about the weather. It was the most polite interrogation I had ever endured. Then, Teresa made her move. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her palm was warm, but her grip was tight. "You know, Morgan," she said softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was thinking about Dad all week. You know what he wanted more than anything? He wanted unity. He hated it when you girls fought. He used to tell me, 'Teresa, as long as the sisters are friends, the family is safe.'" She paused to let the guilt land. She was weaponizing a dead man who, in reality, had spent his final months complaining about how Lena only called when she needed money. "I know, Mom," I said, taking a sip of water. "I want unity too." "Exactly," Gavin said. He set his fork down. The good cop had entered the chat. "And that is why we have been brainstorming. We don't want you to feel pushed out. Morgan, we know you love this place, but we also know the reality of your situation. You are starting a teaching career. The salary is modest. This house is a beast." He leaned forward, putting his elbows on the table. "So, here is the solution we came up with," he said. "We want to be fair. We think Lena should take title to the house. She has the connections to manage the renovations, and she has the time. In exchange, we will make sure you get a larger portion of the liquid cash in the estate. You can take $20,000 from the savings account. Walk away with a nest egg. Lena takes the burden of the property. Everyone wins." I did the math in my head instantly. The house was appraised at $1.2 million. The savings account held $40,000. He was offering me $20,000 for my half of $1 million asset. It was an insult so profound it was almost impressive. "That is an interesting idea," I said. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just kept the ball in the air. "It is the only logical idea," Lena chimed in. She was picking at her food, too excited to eat. "And to make it easy, Dad found a family attorney who can handle the paperwork. You know, simplify things, so we don't have to deal with the slow probate courts. His name is Arthur. He's willing to come up here. He has the transfer forms ready. We just need you to sign a few things to waive your claim to the deed and accept the cash payout." A family attorney I had never heard of. A waiver of claim. Simplify. The trap was set. They wanted me to sign a document that would likely supersede the will, or at least create enough legal mud to bury me. They wanted to bypass the court because the court would look at the will and see I was the heir. "I don't know," I said, rubbing my temples. "I am just so exhausted right now. I have to grade final exams for the undergrads this week. My brain is mush. I don't think I should sign anything legal until I can think straight." "It will only take 10 minutes, Lena pressed. Her voice sharpened slightly. "I can't do it today," I said firmly. "I have a meeting with the department head tomorrow morning. I need to focus." I looked at Gavin. Give me a week. Let me get through this work week. We can meet next weekend. Maybe Sunday. Gavin exchanged a look with Teresa. I saw the calculation in their eyes. They were gauging if I was stalling or just being my usual overwhelmed self. They decided on the latter. Okay, Gavin said. Next Sunday. But Morgan, we need to move fast. The market is shifting. Next Sunday, I promised. They left an hour later, confident that they had closed the deal. They thought I was cornered. They thought I was breaking. As soon as their taillights disappeared around the bend, I went to work. I did not grade exams. I went to the trunk of my car and retrieved the 4 boxes of wireless security cameras I had bought in the next town over. I spent the next 3 hours installing them. I put a tiny black camera on top of the kitchen cabinets, hidden in the shadows of the crown molding. I put one in the bookshelf in the living room, wedged between 2 encyclopedias. I put one on the front porch, angled to capture faces, and one in the hallway pointing at the front door. I synced them all to a cloud account that my family didn't know existed. If they came back while I was at work, I would know. If they brought their photographer back, I would have his face. Then, I went to Grandpa's study. I emptied the filing cabinet, every tax return, every medical record, the original copy of the will, the letters he had written to me. I packed them all into waterproof bins. I drove them to the bank and placed them in the largest safe deposit box they had. I was scrubbing the house of its vulnerability. That night, I was scrolling through social media on a burner account I used to monitor my students' trends, when I decided to check on Lena. She had blocked my main account months ago after a petty argument, but her profile was public. I saw a photo posted 6 hours ago. It was a picture of Lena and her boyfriend, Brett. Brett was a serial entrepreneur who always seemed to be between ventures. In the photo, they were clinking champagne glasses. The caption read, "Big things happening. Finally securing the bag. Coastal living coming soon. Kingswell renovation power couple." I scrolled down to the comments. A friend of his had asked, "Did you get the place?" Brett had replied, "Done deal. Just waiting on the ink. Already talking to investors about the subdivide." I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the drafty house. It wasn't just Lena playing house. It was Brett. He was the one pushing. He was the one who saw the dollar signs. Lena was desperate to keep him, and he was desperate for cash. I was the obstacle standing between Lena and her happily ever after, and between Brett and a quick payout. My phone buzzed. It was Dana. Update from the county clerk monitor. The text read, "The filing service they used has flagged the deed for a final review because of the signature discrepancy, but they are pushing it through. The system shows a scheduled recording date for next Tuesday. They are trying to time it. They want you to sign the waiver on Sunday so that when the deed record's on Tuesday, you can't contest it because you already signed away your rights." It was a pincer movement. The forged deed was the backup plan. The waiver they wanted me to sign on Sunday was the primary plan. If I signed, the forgery didn't matter because I would have legally agreed to the transfer. If I didn't sign, they would let the forgery go through on Tuesday and dare me to fight it. I texted Dana back. "They are coming Sunday with a lawyer," Dana replied. "Good. Let them come. Don't sign anything. Just let them commit to the lie." I put the phone down. The house was silent, but the cameras were blinking their tiny, invisible red lights in the darkness. I felt like a spider sitting in the center of a very intricate web, waiting for the flies to return. Then, my phone lit up again. It was a text from Teresa. She must have been stewing on the drive home. She must have felt that my "maybe next week" wasn't a guarantee. She wanted to make sure I understood the stakes, the mask of the loving mother. The woman who brought roast chicken and talked about unity slipped completely. The message was one sentence, devoid of emojis, devoid of warmth. "If you don't cooperate on Sunday, we will handle it without you." I stared at the glowing screen. There it was, the threat. They weren't asking for permission anymore. They were telling me that my consent was a courtesy they were about to revoke. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the cloud. "Okay, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "Come and handle it." The phone call that set the stage for the final act came on Friday evening. It was brief. It was not a conversation between a mother and a daughter. It was a notification from management to an employee who was being made redundant. "We are coming on Sunday," Teresa said. Her voice was devoid of the trembling, manipulative warmth she had used during the roast chicken dinner. This was a new voice. It was brittle and hard. "We are bringing a family advisor. It is easier to explain everything in person rather than going back and forth over text." I noticed the word choice immediately. Explain, not discuss, not negotiate. Explain. "That is fine," I said. "I will be here." I hung up and immediately dialed Dana. I told her the time. I told her the tone. "Perfect," Dana said. Her voice was the only thing that kept my heart rate steady. If they are bringing an advisor, they are bringing a witness to their own misconduct. I am going to prepare a response package. I am alerting the county fraud unit that there is an active attempt to coerce a transfer. Do not stop them. Morgan, do not warn them. Just let them lay the cards on the table. Sunday morning broke over Kingswell Cove with a heavy, slate-gray sky. The ocean was flat, looking more like a sheet of hammered lead than water. The air was thick with the kind of humidity that promises a storm but refuses to deliver it. I woke up at 7. I did not pace. I did not wring my hands. I made a pot of coffee. I stood in the kitchen and drank it black, listening to the silence of the house. I walked through the rooms, checking the camera angles one last time. The tiny red light on the unit atop the kitchen cabinet blinked once, a slow, reassuring wink. I was not afraid. That was the strange part. I had spent 3 weeks terrified of losing my home, terrified of my family, terrified of the conflict. But now that the enemy was at the gate, the fear had evaporated. In its place was a cold, clinical curiosity. I felt like a scientist behind a one-way mirror, waiting to observe the behavior of a particularly aggressive species of rat. At 11 o'clock, the convoy arrived. It was not just the family SUV this time. A second car followed them into the driveway, a black sedan that had seen better days, with a dent in the rear bumper. I watched from the window. Gavin and Teresa got out of the first car. They looked tense. They were not smiling. They were dressed up, as if they were going to church or a deposition. Lena stepped out of the back seat. She was wearing sunglasses. Even though there was no sun, she looked impatient. From the second car emerged a man I had never seen before. He was short, balding, and wearing a suit that was slightly too large for him. He carried a briefcase that looked worn at the handles. This was the family attorney. He did not look like the kind of lawyer who handled high-end estate planning. He looked like the kind of lawyer you found on a billboard next to the highway advertising quick settlements for slip-and-fall accidents. I opened the door before they could knock. "Hello?" I said. They brushed past me. There were no hugs today, no pleasantries. They moved directly into the dining room. The same way a SWAT team clears a building. They took their seats. The lawyer sat at the head of the table, Grandpa's seat. I remained standing. "Morgan, this is Arthur," Gavin said. He gestured to the man. "Arthur has been helping us sort through the confusion of Dad's estate. He found something important." Arthur cleared his throat. He did not look me in the eye. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not the deed. It looked like a typed letter. "Miss Flores," Arthur began. His voice was oily. "Your parents engaged me to do a deep search of your grandfather's personal papers. In doing so, we discovered a codicil, a document that clarifies his final intentions." He slid the paper across the table. I picked it up. It was a document dated 2 weeks before Grandpa died. The text claimed that Elliot Brooks, being of sound mind, wished to revoke all prior wills and leave the entirety of the Kingswell property to his granddaughter, Lena Flores, citing her future needs and family leadership. I looked at the signature. It was a tragedy of a forgery. Grandpa had Parkinson's tremors in his right hand for the last 3 years of his life. His signature was a jagged, spidery thing that took him a full minute to write. The signature on this paper was smooth. It was looped. It flowed. It was the signature of a man 20 years younger. Furthermore, the date was written as January 12th, 2024. Grandpa never wrote the Sieth after a number. He always wrote 12 John, 2024. He was an engineer. He had specific formatting habits that were as ingrained as his breathing. I looked up at them. I looked at my mother, who was studying her fingernails. I looked at my father, who was staring at the wall. I looked at Lena, who was watching me with a mixture of defiance and hunger. They were not just greedy, they were desperate. They had created a fake document because the real will didn't give them what they wanted. They were trying to override a legal reality with a piece of printer paper. So, Grandpa changed his mind. I said, my voice was neutral. Yes, Arthur said quickly. He realized that the burden of the property was too much for you. He wanted to protect you. This document, well, it technically supersedes everything else. It makes Lena the sole owner effective immediately upon his passing. I looked at Arthur. I wondered how much they were paying him. I wondered if he knew he was committing a crime, or if he was just stupid enough to believe them. I see, I said. Lena leaned forward. Look, Morgan, we don't want to make this ugly. We could take this to court and tie you up for years. We could sue you for back rent for the time you have stayed here. But we are family. She pushed a second document across the table. This is a cooperative move-out agreement, she said. It says that you acknowledge the new ownership. You agree to vacate the premises within 48 hours. In exchange, we agree not to pursue you for any legal fees or rent. And she looked at Gavin. And we will give you $5,000 for moving expenses. Gavin said, $5,000. The exact amount of the loan I had given them 3 years ago. The exact amount they had stolen from me. The symmetry was poetic. I looked at the agreement. It was their out. If I signed this, or even agreed to it verbally and left, they would use it as proof that I accepted their narrative. They would file their forged deed on Tuesday. And if I ever tried to fight back, they would say, but she agreed to leave. She knew it was Lena's. I looked around the room. I looked at the camera hidden in the bookshelf. I looked at the camera on the kitchen cabinet. They were recording every word. They were recording the presentation of the forged codicil. They were recording the coercion. I had enough. I had more than enough. I dropped the paper back onto the table. I let my shoulders slump. I let out a long, ragged sigh. The sound of a woman who has finally been crushed by the weight of the world. I can't fight you, I said. The tension in the room snapped like a dry twig. Teresa let out a gasp of relief. Gavin sat back in his chair. Arthur closed his folder, looking incredibly pleased with himself. I just want this to be over, I continued, keeping my eyes on the floor. If Grandpa changed his mind, then he changed his mind. I don't want to be where I'm not wanted. Smart girl, Arthur said. He sounded triumphant. So, you will sign? Lena asked. I will pack, I said. I sidestepped the question of the signature. I will be ready to go. I just need a little time to get my things together. Lena slammed her hand on the table. It was a happy slam. Done, she said. I already called the movers. They are booked for Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. Tuesday, I repeated. Yes, she said. Tuesday. You need to be out by noon. We have the contractor coming at 1 to start the demo on the garage. They were moving so fast. They were sprinting toward the cliff edge. Okay, I said. I nodded slowly. Okay, Tuesday. Teresa stood up and walked over to me. She tried to hug me again. I stood rigid, letting her arms wrap around me. I knew you would do the right thing. Morgan, she whispered. We are doing this for you. You will see. In a year. You will thank us. I pulled away. I will go start gathering my books. I said, we should go, Gavin said, standing up. He looked eager to leave the scene of the crime. We have a lot of paperwork to finalize with Arthur. They walked to the door. Their steps were light. They were chatting. Lena was already on her phone, texting presumably Brett, telling him that the obstacle had been removed. They walked out of the house with the swagger of conquerors. Arthur paused at the door. You made a wise choice, young lady, he said. These legal battles, they can get very expensive for someone in your position. I watched them get into their cars. I watched the engines start. I watched them back out of the driveway, gravel crunching under their tires. They didn't look back. They didn't see me standing in the doorway. They only saw the dollar signs. As soon as the last car disappeared around the bend, the silence rushed back into the house. But it wasn't empty silence anymore. It was the silence of a fuse burning down. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Dana. She must have been monitoring the status update I sent her the moment they sat down. Good. The text read, "Now they have committed to the timeline in writing. They have presented a forged document to a witness, and they have scheduled an eviction. You are done. Morgan, you survived. Tuesday morning. We end this." I looked at the text. Then I looked at the cooperative move-out agreement still sitting on the dining room table. I picked it up. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the drawer where Grandpa kept his matches. I struck a match and held it to the corner of the paper. I watched the flame curl the edges, turning the white paper into black ash. I watched their generous offer burn until it stung my fingertips. And then I dropped it into the sink and washed the ashes away. They thought I had surrendered. They thought I was packing. I went upstairs, but I didn't pack a single box. Instead, I took a shower. I put on my favorite pajamas. I ordered a pizza. I was going to enjoy my house for 2 more days. And then, on Tuesday, I was going to introduce them to the real owner. Tuesday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The fog from the weekend had burned off, leaving the sky a piercing, relentless blue that offered no cover for what was about to happen. I was awake at 6 o'clock, dressed in a blazer and jeans, a deliberate choice. I was not dressed for moving boxes. I was dressed for business. I sat in the living room with the curtains drawn, listening to the world outside. At exactly 7:45, the silence of the cove was shattered. It began with the deep, guttural rumble of a diesel engine, followed by the hiss of air brakes that sounded like a mechanical beast exhaling. I walked to the window and peered through the slat of the blinds. A massive moving truck, painted in bright orange and white, was backing into the driveway. It was comically large for the narrow lane, its tires crushing the hydrangeas my grandfather had planted along the border. It blocked the entire view of the road. It was an occupation force on wheels. Behind the truck, the family SUV pulled in, followed by the black sedan of their attorney, Arthur, and then a third car arrived, a white van with Quick Pick Locksmith stenciled on the side. I felt a cold flash of anger in my chest. A locksmith. They hadn't just planned to move me out. They had planned to change the locks before lunch. They wanted to make sure that even if I had a key, it would be useless metal by the time the sun went down. They intended to erase my access completely and permanently. I watched them disembark. Lena hopped out of the passenger seat. She was wearing a jumpsuit that looked expensive and utilitarian, the kind of outfit an influencer wears to pretend they are doing manual labor. She was practically glowing. She held a clipboard in her hand, tapping it against her thigh. Gavin got out and immediately started pointing. He gestured to the porch. He gestured to the garage. He was shouting instructions to the 2 men in uniform who had jumped down from the truck cab. "Careful with the door frame," I heard him yell through the glass. "We are going to be sanding these floors later, so try not to scuff them." He was already renovating. He was already living in a future where I did not exist. I turned away from the window. "It is time," I said. I was not speaking to myself. I was speaking to the 2 people sitting at my kitchen table, drinking the coffee I had brewed 30 minutes ago. Dana Keene stood up. She smoothed her skirt and picked up a thick, leather-bound folder. Beside her stood a man named Detective Miller from the County Prosecutor's Fraud Unit. He was a tall man with a face carved out of granite, wearing a windbreaker that simply said, "County Investigator," on the breast pocket. "Let's go say hello," Dana said. We walked to the front door. I could hear footsteps on the porch. I could hear the jingle of the locksmith's tools. I could hear Lena laughing a sound of pure, unadulterated victory. I unlocked the door and swung it open. Lena was mid-laugh. Her hand was reached out, about to knock, but she froze. Her smile faltered for a second, then reassembled itself into a look of impatient pity. "Morning, Morgan," she said, breezing past the fact that she was invading my space. "The guys are here. You got your bags ready? We want to start with the big furniture in the living room, so if you have any boxes in there, You need to move them now. She tried to step inside. I did not move. I stood directly in the center of the doorway, blocking her path. Morgan, move! Gavin barked from the bottom of the steps. We are on a schedule. I stepped out onto the porch. Dana stepped out immediately to my right. Detective Miller stepped out to my left. We formed a wall. The visual impact was instantaneous. Lena took a stumbling step back. Gavin froze mid-gesture. The locksmith, who had been approaching with his drill, stopped dead in his tracks. The movers, sensing the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure, leaned against their truck and crossed their arms. They had seen family fights before. They knew when to pause the clock. Who are these people? Teresa asked, her voice shrill. She walked up from the driveway, clutching her purse. Morgan, why are there strangers here? We agreed to a private family transition. This is not a transition. Mom, I said, and this is not a family matter anymore. Dana stepped forward. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the distinct, razor-sharp authority of someone who knows the law better than anyone else in the zip code. Good morning, she said. I am Dana Keene, legal counsel for the Kingswell Trust. She held up the folder. Gavin scoffed. Trust? What are you talking about? There is no trust. We have the deed. We have the codicil. Arthur, tell them. He turned to his lawyer, Arthur, who was standing by the car. Arthur looked suddenly pale. He was staring at Dana. He knew who she was. In the legal world of our county, Dana Keene was a shark, and Arthur was a minnow who fed on scraps. Dana ignored Gavin. She looked directly at the lead mover. Sir, she said, I am informing you that you are currently trespassing on private property owned by an irrevocable trust. The individual who hired you has no legal authority to authorize your presence or the removal of any assets. If you touch a single item in this house, you will be liable for theft and damages. The mover looked at Gavin, then at Dana. He looked at the badge on Detective Miller's belt. We are good, lady, the mover said, raising his hands. We don't touch nothing without a clear owner. We are on hold. He signaled his partner, and they walked back to the cab of the truck, climbing inside to wait. Gavin's face turned a mottled shade of red. Now listen here, he sputtered. This is ridiculous. I am the son of the deceased. This is my daughter, Lena, the rightful owner. We have documents. He waved the codicil in the air. That is where you are confused. Mr. Flores, Dana said calmly. She opened her folder and pulled out a document with a gold seal at the bottom. This property was transferred into the Kingswell Trust 3 weeks ago. She said, the deed was recorded, verified, and locked. Morgan Flores is the sole trustee. No transfer of ownership can occur without her biometric verification and my countersignature. She turned to Lena. Which makes your attempt to file a quitclaim deed last week very interesting. Ms. Flores? Lena crossed her arms. Her confidence was shaking, but she held on. That trust is fake, she snapped. Grandpa signed the house to me. We have a notary who witnessed it. It is pending with the county right now. Detective Miller stepped forward. He didn't shout. He spoke in a low, flat bore that was terrifying. Ms. Flores, he said, I am Detective Miller with the fraud unit. We reviewed that pending filing this morning. He pulled a small notepad from his pocket. You used a mobile notary service. The ID number listed for the notary on your document belongs to a woman who died 4 years ago. The stamp is a forgery. The filing service, QuickDeed Pro, is currently cooperating with our investigation into a multi-state identity theft ring. The silence that followed was absolute. The seagulls stopped screaming. The wind stopped blowing. Lena's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Gavin looked at Arthur. Arthur, do something. Tell them. Arthur was slowly backing away toward his car. I was just retained to file papers provided by the client. He stammered. I did not verify the origins. I have to go. I have a court appearance. You are not going anywhere. Arthur, Detective Miller said. He didn't move, but his voice was like a leash. We will need a statement from you regarding how you obtained that codicil. Arthur froze. Dana handed a sheaf of papers to Gavin. He took them automatically, his hands shaking. This is a formal notice of void transfer, Dana explained. It states that the Kingswell Trust is the sole owner. It also serves as a cease and desist. Any further attempts to enter this property, change the locks, or file documents regarding this estate will be considered criminal harassment and attempted grand larceny. She looked at the locksmith. I suggest you leave, sir. Unless you want to be an accessory to a burglary. The locksmith didn't wait to be told twice. He turned around, walked to his van, and drove away without a word. The driveway was suddenly feeling very empty. The moving truck engine was idling, a low grumble of wasted fuel. Teresa started to cry. It wasn't the soft, manipulative crying she usually used. This was the jagged, ugly crying of someone who realizes the walls are closing in. Morgan, she sobbed. How could you? Police, we are your family. We were just trying to fix things. We were just trying to be practical. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me drown for years and called it swimming. You weren't trying to be practical. Mom, I said. My voice was steady. You were trying to be thieves, and you weren't very good at it. Lena's face had gone from glowing to gray. The reality was setting in. The house was gone. The money was gone. The victory lap was over before it started. She looked at the moving truck, her grand procession, and realized it was just a bill she would have to pay for a job that wouldn't happen. But she couldn't let it go. She was Lena. She was the sun. The world was supposed to bend to her. She took a step toward me, her hands balled into fists. You can't do this, she hissed. You can't just hoard it. I have plans. I have people waiting on this. Dana stepped in front of me, blocking her. The legal reality is established. Ms. Flores, you are trespassing. Gavin grabbed Lena's arm. Lena, stop. We need to talk to Arthur. We need to figure this out. He tried to pull her back toward the SUV. He was in damage control mode. He realized the legal ground had turned into quicksand. But Lena pulled away from him. She was frantic. Her eyes were wide and wild. Darting between the investigator and the house, she looked like a trapped animal. No, she screamed. We can't just leave Lena. Be quiet. Gavin hissed. I can't be quiet. She yelled, spinning on him. You said it was a sure thing. You said she would fold. She turned back to me. Her face twisted in a mask of pure desperation. Morgan, you have to sign, she pleaded. You don't understand. I looked at her. I really didn't understand. Not until that moment. Why are you so desperate? Lena, I asked. It is just a house. She shook her head violently. It is not just a house, she screamed, the words tearing out of her throat before she could stop them. We already promised the developer it would be done today. He advanced us the money. The sentence hung in the air. Gavin closed his eyes. Teresa put her hand over her mouth. I looked at Lena. He advanced you the money. I repeated. Yes, she cried, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. We spent it. Okay. We paid off the loans. We paid for the car. If we don't give him the title by Friday, he is going to sue us for fraud. He is going to take everything. The truth finally arrived. It wasn't about family legacy. It wasn't about renovation. It was about debt. They had sold a house they didn't own to pay for a lifestyle they couldn't afford, and they had spent the proceeds before the ink was even dry on their fake deed. Detective Miller pulled out his notepad again. Ms. Flores, he said to Lena, did you just admit to accepting funds for the sale of a property you did not hold title to? Lena looked at him. She looked at Gavin. She looked at me. And for the first time in her life, the sun went out. The silence that followed the departure of the moving truck was short-lived. I had expected a period of quiet, a ceasefire while they licked their wounds and consulted with whatever legal counsel they could afford. I was wrong. When you corner a narcissist, they do not reflect on their behavior. They do not apologize. They wage war on reality itself. They could not attack the trust. Dinah had built a fortress of paper and law that impenetrable. impenetrable. The deed was locked, the fraud was documented, and the county investigator was already circling like a shark in the water. So, unable to breach the walls of the estate, they turned their cannons on the only available target, me. It started 48 hours after the locksmith fled my driveway. My phone began to buzz with a relentless, vibrating anger. It wasn't my parents or Lena directly. They had gone radio silent, presumably advised by a lawyer to stop incriminating themselves. Instead, they unleashed the flying monkeys. My Aunt Linda, who I had not spoken to since Christmas 2 years ago, left a voicemail that was 3 minutes of breathless scolding. "Morgan, I heard what you did," she said. Her voice was trembling with righteous indignation. "Calling the police on your own sister, humiliating your parents in front of the neighbors. I knew you were always a little distant, but this is cold. Even for you. You are destroying this family over a house. It is ungrateful." Then came my cousin Mark, texting me in a group chat I had forgotten existed. "Imagine stealing your grandfather's legacy and then threatening to arrest your mom. That is low." Morgan, real low. They had spun the narrative. In their version of events, there was no forged deed, there was no developer, there was no debt, there was only a confused elderly man who wanted unity, and a manipulative, greedy granddaughter who had tricked him into signing everything over to her and was now using the police to bully her grieving family. I did not reply. I did not defend myself. I took screenshots. I saved voicemails. I added them to the digital folder that was rapidly becoming the most depressing autobiography ever written. Then, the direct fire came. My mother sent a single text message on Thursday afternoon. It didn't mention the money Lena had stolen. It didn't mention the lie. "You embarrassed us," she wrote. "You involved outsiders. We could have handled this at the table, but you had to bring in the law. You have broken this family. Outsiders." That was the word that stuck in my throat like a fishbone. To Teresa. The outsider wasn't the developer they had sold me out to. It wasn't the shady notary. It was the truth. The law was the intruder in their fantasy world. I deleted the thread, but the nausea lingered. On Friday, the war moved from the personal to the professional. I was sitting at my desk at the university, grading the final papers of the semester, when the department head asked to see me. Dr. Aris was a kind man, usually prone to talking about his garden, but his face was grave when I walked into his office. "Close the door, Morgan," he said. He slid a printed email across his desk. It was sent from an anonymous Proton Mail account. The subject line read, "Concern regarding faculty member stability." The email was a masterpiece of vague malice. It claimed that I was currently undergoing a severe mental health crisis, that I had been harassing elderly relatives, and that I was financially exploiting a family estate. It suggested that I might be a risk to students and that the university should review my tenure-track status. My hands shook as I read it. They weren't just trying to take the house anymore. They were trying to burn my life down. They knew my career was the one thing I had built entirely on my own, the one thing that had nothing to do with Grandpa or the Cove. So they tried to poison it. "Is this true?" Dr. Aris asked gently. I looked up at him. "No," I said. "I am currently the trustee of my grandfather's estate. My family is attempting to contest the will because they are in significant debt. They are trying to pressure me by attacking my reputation." I reached into my bag and pulled out the restraining notice Dana had filed. I showed him the case number for the fraud investigation. "This is the reality," I said. "That email is retaliation." Dr. Aris read the legal document. He nodded slowly. "I am sorry. Morgan," he said, "I have to file this report, but I will attach your documentation. It won't go anywhere. But you should know this is vicious." I walked out of his office feeling lightheaded. It was one thing to fight in a living room. It was another to have the fight follow me to the place where I earned my bread. That afternoon, I went to Dana's office. I placed the anonymous email on her desk next to a letter I had received in the mail that morning. The letter was from a law firm in the city. Sterling Associates. It was printed on heavy cream-colored paper that screamed hourly billable rates. It was a formal notice of intent to contest the Kingswell Trust on the grounds of undue influence. The letter claimed that I, Morgan Flores, had used my position as a caregiver to isolate Elliot Brooks, manipulate his emotions, and force him to sign documents he did not understand. It painted a picture of me as a predator and Grandpa as a helpless victim. I read it and felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It was a dark, hysterical thing. They are saying I isolated him. I said to Dana, I was the only one who visited. I was the only one who knew his doctors' names. Dana did not laugh. She looked at the letter with the cold, predatory gaze of a hawk spotting a field mouse. This is standard, she said. When the facts are against them, they attack the character. They want to make you look so bad that you settle just to make it stop. They want you to pay them to go away. She leaned forward. Morgan, listen to me. Do not argue with them. Do not write a Facebook post defending yourself. Do not reply to the anonymous email. Emotional arguments are their turf. We fight on our turf. What is our turf? I asked. Evidence, she said. She pulled out a yellow legal pad. I want everything, she said. I want every log you kept. I want the grocery receipts from when you bought his food. I want the pharmacy records. I want the mileage logs from when you drove him to the cardiologist. I want the text messages where you asked your parents to visit and they said no. We are going to bury this undue influence claim under a mountain of mundane, verifiable facts. I spent the weekend becoming an archivist of my own sacrifice. I went through 5 years of records. I found the receipt for the railing I installed in the shower. I found the log of his blood pressure readings, written in my handwriting every morning at 8 o'clock. I found the texts from Lena. Can't come this weekend. Hungover LOL and Grandpa is so boring. You deal with him. I compiled it all. It wasn't just a defense. It was a diary of love. It proved that I hadn't stolen the estate. I had earned it, hour by quiet hour. On Monday morning, a new piece of evidence fell into my lap. I was watering the hydrangeas trying to repair the damage the moving truck had done when Mrs. Gable called me over to the fence. She was holding her iPad. Morgan, she said, I was looking through my birdwatching videos. I have a camera set up on the feeder. I think you should see this. She pressed play. The timestamp was from 4 weeks ago, 2 days before Grandpa died. I was at the hospital. The house was empty. On the screen, I saw Lena's car pull into the driveway. She got out, but she wasn't alone. A man in a sharp suit got out with her. They walked around the property. I saw Lena gesturing to the roof, to the garden. I saw the man taking notes. Then, I saw Lena take a key from under the mat, a spare key I thought only I knew about, and let the man inside. They were in the house for 40 minutes. Mrs. Gable looked at me. I thought she was just grabbing clothes for him, she said, but that man, he looked like a buyer. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. Lena had been giving tours while Grandpa was taking his final breaths. She had been selling the house while his heart was still beating. Can you email this to me, Mrs. Gable? I asked. I sent the video to Dana immediately. It was the smoking gun. It proved premeditation. It proved that the transfer wasn't a sudden decision by Grandpa. It was a calculated liquidation by Lena. Tuesday brought a different kind of call. I didn't recognize the number. I answered it, expecting another angry relative. Ms. Flores, the voice was smooth, male, and practiced. This is Marcus Blackwood. I represent the Apex Development Group. I froze. This was the developer. This was the man Lena had promised the house to. Mr. Blackwood, I said, I believe you should be speaking to my attorney. Now. Let's not get litigious, he purred. I am calling to offer a solution. I understand there is some confusion regarding the title of the Kingswell property. It is a messy situation. Family drama is always difficult. He paused, waiting for me to agree. I said nothing. Look, he continued. My company is very interested in this parcel. We have a vision for it. We are willing to offer a premium cash buyout. Quick and clean. We can clear up this whole trust misunderstanding. Pay off any liens, and everyone walks away happy. You get a check. Your sister gets well. She gets out of her bind. He was trying to charm me. He was trying to bribe me into fixing the mess my family had made. Mr. Blackwood? I said, did you give my sister money for this property? There was a hesitation on the line, a beat of silence that confirmed everything. We entered into a preliminary agreement based on representations made by your father and sister, he said. his voice losing some of its warmth. They assured us they had control of the asset. We advanced them a deposit to secure the contract. A deposit. That was the money Lena had spent. That was the debt that was drowning her. If you don't sell, Ms. Flores, he said, his tone turning icy, we will be forced to recover those funds. And from what I understand, your family doesn't have the liquidity to pay us back. If you sell to us, we forgive the debt. You save them. It was the ultimate guilt trip. He was offering me a chance to be the responsible one again, to sacrifice my inheritance to save Lena from the consequences of her own fraud. I looked at the ocean. I looked at the porch where Grandpa used to sit. I am not selling, Mr. Blackwood, I said, and I am not saving them. If you gave money to people who didn't own the land. That sounds like a bad investment. I suggest you call your lawyer. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of power. I had said no. For the first time in my life, I had looked at a mess Lena made and refused to pick up the broom. I called Dana. He called me. I said, Blackwood. He confirmed the deposit. Excellent. Dana said, that connects the motive to the fraud. We have the why. Now we just need to nail down the how. She told me she had scheduled a formal case conference for the following week. She had subpoenaed the records from the notary service and the bank records from my parents. She was going to drag the financial rot into the daylight. We are going to make them answer for every dollar, she said. I hung up and started to make dinner. I felt tired, but it was a good tired, the kind of tired that comes from building something, not just carrying it. Then, at 8 o'clock, my phone rang again. It was Detective Miller. Ms. Flores, he said, I need you to listen carefully. His voice was urgent. It wasn't his usual monotone. What is it? I asked. We have a flag on your grandfather's social security number. He said. My heart stopped. What kind of flag? Someone tried to open a home equity line of credit in his name this morning. Miller said, online application. They used his old driver's license number and the Kingswell address. But he is dead, I whispered. Exactly, Miller said. And the IP address for the application didn't come from a hacker in Russia. It came from a residential internet connection in the city. He paused. It came from an apartment registered to a Brett Daniels. Brett, Lena's boyfriend. They weren't just trying to steal the house anymore. They were trying to resurrect a dead man to borrow against a property they didn't own. They had crossed the line from greed into pure, desperate criminality. Detective, I said, do what you have to do. I hung up the phone. I looked at the empty house. I realized then that there was no bottom to this. There was no line they wouldn't cross, and there was no going back. The unraveling of the truth did not happen with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating slide of a spreadsheet across a mahogany desk. I was back in Dana Keene's office on Thursday morning. The rain was lashing against the window pane, blurring the outside world into gray smears. But inside, the fluorescent lights were unforgiving. Detective Miller was there too, sitting in the corner, flipping through a file that had grown significantly thicker in the last 48 hours. We found the motive, Dana said. Her voice was devoid of triumph. It was heavy with the specific exhaustion that comes from seeing the worst in people. She tapped the spreadsheet. I assumed this was about greed. Morgan, I assumed your sister saw $1 million asset and wanted to cash out to fund a lavish lifestyle. I was wrong. It wasn't greed. It was panic. I looked at the numbers. My eyes scanned the columns. Red ink bleeding into black. Lena is not just in debt, Dana explained. She is insolvent. We ran a forensic check on her financials after the fraud flag was raised. Your sister has 6 maxed-out credit cards. That is the tip of the iceberg. She has 3 personal loans from private, non-bank lenders, the kind of lenders who charge 40% interest and don't ask for credit scores. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. 40%. That was loan shark territory. It gets worse, Detective Miller added from the corner. He didn't look up. She is facing a lawsuit from a former business partner in the city. Apparently, she misappropriated funds from a startup venture last year. She needs $75,000 by the end of the month just to stay out of civil court. I sat back in my chair. I tried to picture Lena, my golden sister, the one who always had the new clothes, the new car, the perfect Instagram life. It was all a facade. She wasn't living the high life. She was running a Ponzi scheme with her own existence. But that is not the part that will break your heart, Dana said softly. She turned the page. Your father knows. I froze. Gavin. He didn't just know, Dana said. He participated. We found a co-signed promissory note for one of the private loans. Gavin put his signature next to Lena's. He guaranteed the debt. And, Dana continued, pointing to a series of transfers. Your mother has been moving money between their retirement accounts and a checking account to make the minimum payments. They have drained nearly 30% of their savings in the last 6 months trying to plug the holes in Lena's sinking ship. The room spun slightly. The developer deal, I whispered. The renovation. It was a bailout, Dana confirmed. They didn't want to renovate the house. They needed the house to be collateral. The deposit the developer mentioned. That wasn't for the sale. That was an emergency infusion of cash to pay off the most aggressive of Lena's creditors. They took the money, promised him the deed, and then realized they couldn't deliver because you refused to roll over. The pieces slammed into place. The urgency. The tonight would be best deadline. The forgery. They weren't just impatient. They were terrified. They had already spent the money they promised the developer. And if they didn't hand over the title, the developer would sue them. The creditors would come for Gavin, and the whole house of cards would collapse. The fraudulent deed was not Plan A. I realized aloud. No, Dana said. Plan A was you being the good daughter. Plan A was you handing it over willingly because they told you to. When you said okay but didn't sign the rights away, you forced them to Plan B. I felt sick. I felt a physical nausea that rose in my throat. They weren't protecting the family legacy. They were cannibalizing it to save themselves from their own financial incompetence. And then, as if the universe decided I hadn't had enough, my phone pinged. I looked down. It was an email notification. It was from my father. But the subject line was re-timeline for possession. I opened it. It wasn't addressed to me. It was a forward. He must have meant to send it to Arthur. Their incompetence of a lawyer. Or maybe to Lena. But in his panic, he had auto-filled Morgan and hit send. It was a thread between Gavin and Marcus Blackwood. The developer, Gavin Marcus. We are handling the sister. She is temporary. A placeholder. We will have her out by Tuesday. Do not pull the funding. We need that second tranche to cover the legal fees. Marcus, fix it. Gavin, you said she was soft. You said she would walk. If I don't have the deed by Friday, I am filing against your primary residence. Gavin. She is soft. She just needs a push. We are applying pressure. Just give us 48 hours. I stared at the words on the screen. Temporary, placeholder, soft. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a speed bump, a minor inconvenience on the road to their salvation. I handed the phone to Dana. She read it, her expression hardening into stone. Save this, she said. This proves intent. This proves they were negotiating the sale of assets they knew they didn't own. This is conspiracy. She turned back to her computer. I have something else. Morgan, I wasn't sure if I should show you yet, but I think you need to see it. She clicked on an audio file. It was a recording from her office, dated 4 months ago. I heard a voice. It was raspy, weak, but distinct. I am afraid. Dana. It was Grandpa. Hearing his voice was like a physical blow. Why are you afraid? Elliot, Dana's voice on the recording, asked. Because they are hungry, Grandpa said. Lena looks at this house and sees a check. Gavin looks at me and sees a burden. Morgan is the only one who looks at me and sees a man. When I die, they will eat her alive if I don't build a wall around her. They will take this place, sell it for parts, and leave her with nothing. You have to lock it down. Dana, don't let them bully her. The recording ended. I put my head in my hands. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I felt a cold, burning rage. He had known. He had sat in this very chair, terrified of his own son and granddaughter, and he had used his last burst of energy to protect me. They called me temporary. He called me his protector. Detective Miller cleared his throat. There is one more thing. Ms. Flores, the notary. I looked up. We traced the stamp on the forged deed. He said, it belongs to a deceased woman, as we knew, but the digital footprint of the user, the person who actually applied the stamp in the software, links back to a messy IP address chain. We found 6 other filings in neighboring towns using the same stolen credentials. All of them were quitclaim deeds, transferring property from elderly or deceased owners to younger relatives or shell companies. He closed the file. Your sister and her boyfriend didn't just download a form from the internet. They used a service that specializes in this. They tapped into a fraud ring. We are not just looking at your family anymore. We are looking at a pattern. I walked out of the office an hour later. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy and cold. I drove back to the house, my house. Grandpa's house, and waited. I knew she would come. The email from Gavin said they had 48 hours. That time was almost up. The developer was threatening their own home. The desperation would be peaking. She arrived at 9 o'clock at night. I saw the headlights cut through the darkness. She was alone. No Gavin, no Teresa, no locksmith, just Lena. She didn't use her key. She knocked. I opened the door. She looked terrible. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, and she was wearing a sweatshirt that looked like she had slept in it. The glowing, confident influencer from Tuesday morning was gone. In her place was a frightened child. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice was small. I stepped aside. She walked into the living room and sat on the edge of the sofa. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked at her hands. "I am sorry," she said. I stood by the fireplace. "What are you sorry for?" "Lena." "Getting caught or doing it?" She flinched. "Morgan, please, you don't know what is happening. I know about the debt." I said, "I know about the loans. I know about the lawsuit. I know Gavin co-signed. I know you spent the deposit." Her head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. "How?" "It doesn't matter how," I said. "I know." She crumbled. She put her face in her hands and started to sob. It was a guttural, ugly sound. "They are going to kill me. Morgan." She wept. "Not literally, but they will destroy me. Brett is going to leave. The lenders are calling Dad. Mom is draining her retirement. If I don't get this title to Blackwood by Friday, he is going to sue us. He is going to take Mom and Dad's house." She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. "You have to help us. Please. I am your sister. You can't let them lose their home because of a stupid mistake I made." "A mistake," I repeated. "A mistake is forgetting to call on a birthday, forging a deed, hiring a fake notary, and trying to evict me from my own home is not a mistake. Lena, it is a crime." She stood up. She walked toward me. Her hands clasped. "I will pay you back," she pleaded. "I swear. Once the development deal goes through, there will be millions. I will give you half. I will give you everything. I just need the signature now. Just sign the transfer so we can satisfy Blackwood. Please, Morgan, do it for Mom and Dad." I looked at her. I saw the fear. Yes. But underneath the fear, I still saw the entitlement. She still believed that my purpose on this earth was to fix her messes. She still believed that my stability was a resource she could mine whenever she hit rock bottom. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. "What?" she whispered. I said no. I repeated, "I am not signing. I am not selling. And I am not saving you." Her face changed. The sorrow evaporated, replaced by a flash of pure, venomous anger. "You are so selfish," she spat. "You have always been selfish. You sit here in this big house all by yourself while we are drowning. You want to see us fail. You want to see Dad lose his pension. You did this." "Lena," I said calmly, "you and Dad did this. You signed the papers. You spent the money." She stepped closer. "You think you have won. You think because you have some fancy trust lawyer that you are safe. We will drag you through court for years. We will drain every penny of that inheritance until you have nothing left. We will tell everyone what you did. Tell them, I said. Tell them I refuse to let you steal $1 million. See whose side they take. She stared at me, her chest heaving. She realized, finally, that the easy daughter was dead. The doormat had become a stone wall. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I hate you, she hissed. I know, I said. She turned and ran out the door. I watched her get into her car. She slammed the door so hard I felt the vibration in the floorboards. She peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. Disappearing into the dark, I locked the door. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I had faced the monster, and it was just a desperate, broken girl. My phone rang. It was Dana. I just got off the phone with the court clerk, Dana said. Her voice was brisk, professional. The other side, your parents' new attorney, a real one this time, filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order against the trust, claiming fraud on your part. They are throwing a Hail Mary. Let them... I said, we have a hearing scheduled for Monday morning. Dana said, it is mandatory. The judge wants everyone in the room. You, me, Lena, your parents, and the evidence. She paused. This is it. Morgan, no more hiding behind lawyers. No more text messages. On Monday, the judge sees everything. The trust, the forgery, the debt, the email, the recording. I looked at the empty spot on the sofa where Lena had sat. Good, I said. I am ready. Dana's voice softened slightly. If we do this, Morgan, if we walk into that courtroom and present this evidence, there is no going back. You are not just winning a lawsuit. You are potentially sending your family to prison. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Grandpa's shaking voice on the recording. They will eat her alive. I thought about the word placeholder. I am not the one sending them there. Dana, I said, they drove themselves. I am just the one turning on the lights. See you in court, Dana said. I hung up. Outside, the storm was picking up again, battering the old house. But inside, the walls held. Grandpa had built them strong, and on Monday, I would make sure they stayed that way. Monday morning at the county courthouse smelled like floor wax and anxiety. The hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock in the morning in the chambers of Judge Holloway, a woman known for her impatience with family squabbles and her absolute reverence for paper trails. I arrived 15 minutes early with Dana Keene and Detective Miller. I wore a navy blue suit, the same one I had worn to my thesis defense. I kept my hands folded on the table. I did not look at my phone. I did not fidget. I was a statue of composure. My family arrived at 8:55. They were performing a tragedy. Teresa was clutching a tissue to her nose, though her eyes were dry. Gavin was wearing a suit that looked slightly rumpled, trying to project the image of a weary, grieving father. Lena walked in behind them, dressed in black, looking small and fragile. It was a costume. They were dressed as victims. Their lawyer, a high-priced litigator named Mr. Sterling from the city, set his briefcase down with a heavy thud. He nodded to Dana. It was the nod of a man who thought he was about to crush a small-town attorney. We all sat down. The silence in the room was thick enough to choke on. Judge Holloway entered. We stood. We sat. Judge Holloway looked over her glasses at the file. We are here regarding the emergency motion to contest the validity of the Kingswell Trust, she said. Her voice was dry. Mr. Sterling, you are alleging undue influence. Proceed. Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket. Your Honor, he began, his voice rich and baritone. We have a simple case of elder abuse. My clients, the daughter and son of the deceased, were excluded from the estate of a man who was suffering from cognitive decline. The respondent, Ms. Morgan Flores, used her position as a caregiver to isolate Mr. Brooks. She controlled his medication. She controlled his access to the phone. She manipulated a dying man into signing a trust document that disinherited his own children in favor of her. He gestured to me. We are asking the court to void the trust and revert the estate to the natural heirs, he concluded. Judge Holloway looked at Dana. Ms. Keene, Dana did not stand up immediately. She opened her binder. She took out a small USB drive and placed it on the table. "Your Honor," Dana said. Remaining seated, the allegation of undue influence requires proof that the deceased was coerced. We are submitting into evidence a video deposition taken by my office 4 months prior to Mr. Brooks's death. In this video, Mr. Brooks is alone. He is lucid. And he explains exactly why he is creating this trust. Sterling objected. "Your Honor, we haven't seen this. It was provided in discovery on Friday afternoon." Dana said calmly, "Perhaps you missed the email." Judge Holloway waved her hand. "Play it." Dana plugged the drive into the court's media system. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. There was Grandpa. He was sitting in Dana's office, wearing his favorite flannel shirt. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. "Why are you doing this?" Elliot Dana's voice asked from off-camera. Grandpa looked directly into the lens. "Because I know my family," he said. His voice filled the courtroom. "Gavin is a good man, but he is weak with money. Teresa follows Gavin, and Lena has an appetite she cannot feed. If I leave them this house, they will sell it within a month to pay off debts I did not create." On the other side of the table, I saw Gavin flinch. Lena stared at the screen, her jaw tight. "Morgan is different," Grandpa continued. "She is the only one who never asked me for a dime. She is the only one who fixed the roof instead of asking how much the tiles were worth. I'm leaving it to her not because she asked, but because she is the only one who will keep it standing. I am doing this of my own free will, to protect her from them." The video ended. The screen went black. The room was silent. Judge Holloway looked at Sterling. That seemed fairly specific. "Counselor." Sterling cleared his throat. He shifted his weight. "Well, Your Honor, a video can be staged. We don't know what threats were made before the camera rolled. And regardless, we have a codicil dated after this video, signed by Mr. Brooks, transferring the property to Lena Flores." "Ah, yes," Judge Holloway said. "The codicil." She picked up a document from her stack. "This is the document that was attempted to be filed with the county clerk last week." "Correct." "Yes, Your Honor," Sterling said. Judge Holloway turned to Detective Miller, who was sitting quietly at the end of the table. "Detective," she said, "you have a report regarding this filing." Miller stood up. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like the person you call when the lawyers are done lying. "Yes, Judge," Miller said. "We analyzed the notary stamp on that codicil. The commission number belongs to a Janet Weiss. Ms. Weiss passed away in 2020. The stamp is a forgery. Furthermore, the digital signature of the witness matches an IP address associated with a Mr. Brett Daniels, who I understand is the partner of Ms. Lena Flores." Sterling froze. He looked at his clients. Lena was looking at the table. Gavin was looking at the ceiling. Miller continued. "We also have records from a filing service called Quick Deed Pro. The account was paid for by a credit card in the name of Gavin Flores. The transaction date was 3 weeks after Mr. Brooks died. They paid for a backdated rush order." Judge Holloway's expression did not change, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She looked at Sterling. "Counselor," she said softly, "are you asking this court to validate a document that the fraud unit has identified as a forgery paid for by your client?" Sterling was a professional. He knew when the ship had hit the iceberg. He closed his folder. "I was not aware of the provenance of that document. Your Honor," he said, "if these facts are accurate, I must request a recess to consult with my clients regarding my continued representation." "Sit down." "Mr. Sterling," Judge Holloway said, "we are not recessing yet. I have a question for Ms. Lena Flores." Lena looked up. She looked terrified. "Ms. Flores," the judge said, "why was there such urgency? Why did you attempt to evict your sister with a moving truck before the deed was even recorded?" Lena stammered. "We just wanted to start renovations." Dana interrupted. "Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit C." She slid the printout of the email thread across the table, the one between Gavin and the developer. "This is an email chain between Gavin Flores and Marcus Blackwood of Apex Development." Dana said, "In it, They discuss a deadline of last Friday to transfer the title in exchange for forgiveness of a personal debt. In this email, Mr. Flores refers to his daughter Morgan as a placeholder and promises to handle her. Judge Holloway read the email. She read it slowly. Then she took off her glasses and set them on the bench. She looked at Gavin. Mr. Flores, she said, you came into my courtroom claiming you were protecting your family legacy from an unstable daughter, but the evidence suggests you were selling your father's home to pay off a loan you co-signed for your other daughter. Is that a fair summary? Gavin opened his mouth. We were just trying to survive. Your Honor, it is complicated. Families help each other. Morgan didn't need the house. We needed the money. We were protecting the family from ruin. We were protecting the family. The mantra of the abuser. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Mr. Flores, stealing from an estate is not protecting the family. It is theft. Forging a deed is not a technicality. It is a felony. She turned to me. Ms. Flores, she said, the trust is valid. The execution was perfect. You are the sole trustee and beneficiary. The challenge is dismissed with prejudice. She turned back to Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I am advising you to withdraw this motion immediately, and I am referring the evidence of the forged deed and the fraudulent filing to the district attorney's office for review. This is no longer a civil matter. Sterling looked pale. Motion withdrawn. Your Honor. Dana stood up. One more thing. Your Honor, given the attempted eviction and the harassment my client has endured, we are requesting a permanent order of protection. We want Mr. Gavin Flores, Mrs. Teresa Flores, and Ms. Lena Flores barred from the property and from contacting the trustee regarding estate matters. Granted, Judge Holloway said, banging her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. The hearing was over. It had taken 20 minutes to dismantle their entire reality. We walked out of the chambers and into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Sterling did not wait for his clients. He walked briskly toward the elevators, muttering into his phone, presumably doing damage control for his own license. My parents and Lena stood by the water fountain. They looked stripped. The performance was over. There was no audience left to impress. Teresa looked at me. Her eyes were red. You sent us to jail, she whispered. That is what you did. The judge said she is sending it to the district attorney. Are you happy? Morgan. You put your own mother in front of a prosecutor. I didn't answer. I looked at Gavin. He looked old. The bluster was gone. He was just a man who had bet everything on a lie and lost. Lena stepped forward. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked cold. You could have just shared it, she said. It was $1 million. We could have all been fine. But you had to have it all. You think you are better than us? You are just alone. That is all you are. You have a big house and no one to fill it. I looked at them. I looked at the 3 people who had defined my worth for 28 years. I looked at the people who had taught me to shrink so they could expand. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. You are wrong. Lena. I said. She sneered. About what? I didn't take it all. I said, I protected it, and I didn't send you to the prosecutor. You sent yourselves the moment you decided my signature was something you could fake. I turned to walk away. Morgan Gavin called out. His voice cracked. What are we supposed to do? The developer, he's going to take our house. I stopped. I didn't turn around. I don't know. Dad, I said, I guess you will have to figure it out. I walked down the long marble hallway. I heard them arguing behind me. I heard Lena blaming Gavin. I heard Teresa crying. The sounds faded as I pushed through the heavy double doors and stepped out into the sunlight. I drove straight back to Kingswell Cove. I pulled into the driveway. The moving truck tracks were still visible in the dirt, scars that would heal with the next rain. I walked up the steps to the porch. I sat down in Grandpa's rocking chair. The ocean was calm today. The water was a deep, steady blue. I could hear the bell of a buoy clanging softly in the distance. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of salt and pine. It smelled like freedom. I was not alone. I had the house. I had the memory of the man who loved me enough to build a wall around me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the easy daughter. I wasn't the placeholder. I was the one who stayed. I closed my eyes and listened to the waves. I was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story on the Maya Revenge Stories channel. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop your location in the comments section below so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and press the hype button to help this video reach more people.